So then the Mars factor becomes accentuated more for 30 years. Then it moved to into Sag, and the Jupiter factor came in more. Now it's in Capricorn, and it's on the grumpy old man side more. It's a little bit more the discipline side, or the time, how much time I got, is what have I achieved, what haven't. That's come in, but it affects the rule as the progression the sun's texting the signs. It affects the rulers, but it empowers those rulers. That then tends to affect your natal chart and how you respond to the transits. You can't just contrive this. This is stuff that comes in as you work with this. So we just had the 30 steps. I'm not going through all, but we just went through the 30 steps, basically going through the points, pattern type, moon phases, sun, moon, ascendant, and the points. I didn't talk sun, moon, ascendant, so my Libra, sun, Cancer, moon, Virgo rising. But then we had the same thing, looking above below the points for the houses. And then we had the main thing of taking each planet and looking in the sign, the house, and the aspects to it, and seeing each planet at a time and what it does. Okay. And at the last point, there's the angles and what's happening with the angles, and the signs on the house cusp side. These are the things we did with natal charts. These are the things you have to be familiar with. You have to be able to diversely, like a lot of times we've done the chart, we know it, so you can, when something happens, we can then go back up and say, oh, that planet's being touched, it's in this house, it's in this sign, it has these factors. We can go back and reconstruct that planet and the sign in the house and the aspects, and you rebuild that without having to do the whole chart. And then we're selectively rebuilding it. But that's the first part of it. And you have to spend time working on the natal chart to see who the person is and what the vulnerabilities are from the natal chart before you even look at the transits. If you see the transits first, you still have to back up and say, well, wait a second, how's this person going to deal with it? What's their take on this? That's important. Well, the transits, we've all done the 7-year transits. It's easy. So I'm doing my transit. We're going to be doing mine for, we are doing mine for 1967. So if we follow these around, Saturn starts in my 12th house, hits my ascendant in 49. That's when my mother got pregnant, my brother was born, my grandfather died, my grandmother died, my grandmother died, my grandfather died, and my brother, my mother's father, mother, and her brother all died within 6 months of each other. The mother died, the father couldn't live without the mother, and then the brother couldn't live without his mother, drank himself to death, and he was gone in 4 months. So this has all happened with Saturn on my ascendant. I'm only 3 years or 2 to 3 years old. I don't know what's going on, but it's certainly affecting me. So, I went over my son. We've been through all this stuff, so I'm not going, but it goes down over my son when I was very young, starting school. I defined goals and things. That's when I was on the gym team. And I had a teacher that was outside of somewhat the abusive home. It was really challenging, but it was good. It was like new. Then it hit my IC, 56. My youngest brother was born. He was very sickly. And then by 64, 65, Saturn hit my descendant. So when you're looking at, I'm looking at 67, which is just above the horizon, above the descendant. So we're looking at the chart for that time, but you have to look back and see from 67, I'm looking back, when was the last angle it crossed over? It crossed over my descendant 2 years earlier. So Saturn went above the horizon. Okay, but it had been coming from below the horizon most of my life, except for the first 2 years. So I come out of it, it was somewhat abusive, alcoholic home situation. It was difficult. And we got knocked around, that was normal. I mean, I never knew that was, but in certain ways, there were certain, my social factors were somewhat damaged without me knowing about it. So as I came up to 64, 65, I'd finished high school, went to university for a year or two, but eventually I disassociated and I'm not fitting in here, I'm not getting a job, I'm not doing this. And I pulled away and I just decided to go, this was the hippie time. So, well, it wasn't hippie time, it was Dylan. Yeah, I guess it was this roots of it. The hippies really 67, but this was, I took off and traveled. I left home. There's nothing's working positively. I'm going to go and I traveled for a couple of years doing nothing. Kept traveling and getting by, having adventures, but not really being responsible, not really working. But as that came up, we were at the point where it's just about, I've done this for a couple of years, and this crazy lifestyle, it's just about to come up to the Saturn opposition, opposing my son, and this is the big challenge going on if I came to get my chart reading from you at this time, you're looking at me, you're seeing me, but you're seeing I'm going into the Saturn opposition. How are you gonna talk to me about that? I mean, how old am I then? I'm 21. So I had all the youthful enthusiasm, but I had an attitude of not fit in. And really, I hadn't worked or had jobs, so I didn't have any seniority or any place where I was making money, where I was a reliable person to be in a relationship with or whatever. I was really just out there. So, and I was beginning to become unhappy with that I wasn't fitting in. I wasn't finding relationships. I wasn't being in places. It was beginning to bother me. But then I'd already left and I couldn't go back to where I was. I didn't know what to do. This was my dilemma around this. So Saturn is going from my descendant. It's coming up to the opposition of my sun. It's supposed to be going, and it's going up to my midheaven. This is the phase I'm in. This is the information I'm going to need to know at that time of where I'm going at. I'm disassociated. I'm not relating to the Saturn cycle building up to the midheaven. I'm relating to it in a negative way. I want to go back to below the horizon, live in my own way. Even though I didn't want to go back to where I was, it was just living on my own. So this was the puzzle. And this is the thing you're going to prepare someone to look for, that point. So once you get this, then it's where this is tied up to what happened when Saturn hit the IC when my brother was born. Not only was my brother born, because he was sickly, we had lived in a kind of on the edge of a river in a poor house, but I played in the river, fished in the river, and we had nature around us. It was like the greatest place to grow up. It was like a Tom Sawyer paradise. And just because of this, we had to move away. We moved away from the river and into an apartment, and I didn't have that whole slice of my life was gone. Like the best memories and things that changed because I didn't get around to nature anymore the same way. I was going when I can, but not in the same way at all. Not when it's every day I could be there. So things had changed along. It's coming up to then I hit the descendant, and I'd left university, and I just to travel on my own. Well, I did a year in university, 2 years, but then I left to travel in this process. But really, I wasn't establishing relationships. There was no reason to stay in a place. And so that was a great time to go off and travel. Everybody was, so many people were doing it. But it was starting to catch up to me. I started feeling isolated or lost by the Saturn opposed my sun. So this is just before that's happening. And so if I were coming to see, what would you say? So this is a puzzle. So you see it in the chart and you're looking at it, and you got to think how, I'm going to talk about that. But when you're trying to direct a person, how's he going to get to his midheaven? What's going to happen in midheaven? And that would have been in 5 more years, 4 or 5 more years. Okay, so that's the puzzle. It's not, there's never, Saturn, when Saturn went over the IC, I was too young. That was the grandparents dying and going out without the family support system. But that itself a big loss in a way. When I look back now, being a grandparent, that's one of the best experiences of my life. So, okay, but the Saturn gives you immediately the focus, but once you see the Saturn where it is, then you have to look back to the last angle it crossed, the next angle it's going to touch, and you get a sense of what quadrant it's in. This is increasing influence, being able to learning how to function more and more and be part of the world more and more, and I really wasn't equipped. So really, I was equipped to be me, but I stayed in people's houses. I didn't work. I traveled. When everything got pressured, I would move to another city. I just traveled, and that was it. Okay, that's the puzzle. Okay, but then you always have to go back, and depending where you are in a second, you go back. You want to see what motivates the person, what came up. But that's a young kid. It's harder to see. But yeah, I see, and you might look at when they had the identity crisis of Saturn going below the horizon. But in 77, that's not the concern. It's really, you're young, you're trying to see, what am I going to do with my life? Where am I going to go? So really, I wasn't having relationships. I didn't have a job. I wasn't making money. I wasn't a good investment. Simple. Not how I saw it at the time. Okay, so to get this information, there's several ways. We've done it. We have for all of us in the class, we've got the Saturn graph, but you can go into WinStar and run off the transits to natal and just select the Saturn and the squares to everything, all the personal planets, and it'll give you, this one is done This one was done, you can set 1 degree applying and separating. So this one gives you 3 points for each aspect. It tells you when it gets within a degree, when it hits exact, and when it's separating. So it gives you the 3 times. On our graphs, we just have the 1 day, and we allow for the time before, time after, within a degree there. So that whole period of time is going to be the aspect. But here it's spelling it out exactly on the printing sheet. So that's useful to have. So it's used to have this printed out and just have them as a backup so you can get to the exact timings when you have to. I haven't marked this very much, but just one of the things. And then once you get the Saturn, then you have to, so we saw where Saturn was, we got to fix it. We got to fix on where the person with Saturn, what they're going to deal with. We got the anchor on their chart. And in seeing that Saturn going to be opposing my Sun, which is my values in the 2nd house, and the problems of not fitting in out in the world, why bother? Like when I left home, it's why bother? Everything's negative here. There's no sense staying here. I may as well go anyway and nothing to lose. All of a sudden, I felt something was missing. So here's my 8-year, the 8-year graph, the outer planets. We got the Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and the conjunction squares for 8 years, 66, 67, 68, 69. You're going to notice 66, 67, the 2 years where I was traveling around, goofing off, doing nothing, just being with whoever. And let's say living in Haight-Ashbury, Greenwich Village, traveling different places. These were just, was an adventurous time, but it really wasn't a responsible time. It was just extending horizons, running across people that were different than the oppressive people where I was growing up, where I wasn't fitting in. Partly because we were poor and my parents weren't that integrated into community either, although they were trying, but most of my friends were more well off than me. Not 1 or 2 friends were about similar. Anyways, but I didn't, there wasn't a lot of pressure on me there. I got away with it. But if we're looking at, say, the fall of September and I'm coming to see you as an astrologer, you're sitting there, you're looking at this, you get a sense of the Saturn. You may not know that I'm depressed or I'm dysfunctional or those things, but you're going to run into it by talking to me. You would have seen that. I had beard, long hair, you would have seen it. You know, like, where's he going to work? I was really into my ideas. I was writing poetry, I was reading, and I was studying mysticism and things as I was traveling along. So that was my sense of purpose. But there's no big out of planet crisis, but for starting from 68, just straight ahead, Saturn's going to square the moon. Where am I going to live? Saturn's going to oppose the Sun. There's restrictions coming in. So if I'm staying where I was, I don't have a job. Where am I going to stay? I'm going to stay at my homes and mom's. I'm going to be depressed being at home. So like, I was sitting on the road. I went back home. I was back home staying at my mom's place for a while. I was working, I had a job at Exploder to make some money to try and get a boat ticket to go to Europe. But really, I didn't really have much of a sense other than that. I wanted to, yeah, nothing was working for me in North America. I was just disenchanted. So, but you can see this coming up difficult. And the Saturn opposes the moon, Saturn opposes the Sun, and then it squares itself, opposes Jupiter for the next 2 years. And then it squares itself, opposes Mars. And then it goes in by 71, it conjuncts the midheaven and opposes my Venus. Okay, so these are things happen. So